In today's video, I would like to share with you exactly how I trained for my first 100k ultra trail marathon, Doin Thanon, Thailand by UTMB Elephant 100, with the hope of sharing with you helpful tips and tricks that you can apply in your own preparation for your first 100k. 100k is a brutal event, by far the hardest thing I have ever done, and was an epic experience, adventure and fitness challenge. The preparation for this event was long, difficult and at times spot on, and other times very spotty and erratic due to circumstances out of my control. To date, I think it was the preparation for an event where I had the most problems and was more inconsistent basically. It was also the first time that I tested out some training methodologies that I've never done before, and I would like to share them with you in this video. A disclaimer, of course, I am not a coach, nor do I intend to be, and this is just a video about my experience of training to complete, not to race, a 100-kilometer mountain ultra. I think this video can help you understand, when preparing for an event with so many unknowns, what might be the key concepts to follow to ensure a solid build, and which are the absolute most fundamental sessions to nail in order to complete it. This video, if anything, I think can serve as a testament to the fact that general consistency in endurance training, yes, not even running specific, over months and months, can make up for problems in the final stages. Before getting stuck into the details of the training, a message from the sponsor of today's video. This video is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a credentialed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice in moments when you need it, from wherever you are in the world. Just as much as physical health and training is important, I found dedicating time to mental health to be tremendously important and very helpful. In some moments of life when I felt overwhelmed in the past, some focused therapy sessions helped me gain clarity, perspective, and navigate tough moments with more strength and re-emerge with vigor. But I found the physical act of starting therapy to be hard. A big barrier for entry of therapy is finding the right therapist near you. How do you choose the right therapist? What are the odds that the best professional that can help you is close enough to be convenient for you to get there physically? With BetterHelp, you fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs. Then you will be matched to one of the over 30,000 therapists in their network based on your specific needs, preferences, and location. This gives you access to a wider range of expertise that might be available in your city. Also, you can schedule the most comfortable version of therapy for you. If you find that video interactions are not your jam, you can schedule your therapy sessions as a phone call or even via messaging if you prefer that. If you think you might benefit from therapy, consider BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/Delorenzi. I've personally used BetterHelp, and one of the standout features for me was the possibility of switching therapist when I felt the one assigned to me was not the perfect fit at no additional cost. It was very easy to switch, and I ended up finding literally the perfect therapist for me after doing so. Over 4 million people have used BetterHelp to start living a healthier, happier life. Clicking the link in the description helps support this channel, and it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with the therapist and see if it helps you. Go to betterhelp.com/Delorenzi to get started on your therapy journey today. Okay, back to the training. Before I get deep into the training, I need to provide you with some context so you can understand both the motivations for attempting the 100k distance and why I used the training methodologies that I used. So to say I love trail running is an understatement. When I had my major injury in 2018, Billy Yang videos were the introduction to these freaks who were running 100 miles in the mountains. I had no idea that people were doing such a thing. His videos, alongside with Ironman videos, were huge sources of inspiration to hopefully one day get back to being fully healed and maybe try and experience what these people felt doing these crazy things like ultras or Ironman. Even if up to that point I had never done anything in my life, I felt inspired and very moved by these dogs. I then healed this injury through swimming. Then I took a long path preparing for Ironmans in the past 5 years, as I felt it was the best way to, from zero, learn about endurance and ultra endurance, build fitness consistently, and monitor my progress. This was because I understood the hard way that my body was in no way conditioned for running, and especially long distance running. Starting from zero, as the vast majority of newbie runners do, I got injured time and time again. This led me to learning along the way the value of cross-training on the bike and the value of proper running technique, form, and volume ramp up. I trained for Ironmans, cycling, and road running for 4 years consistently, and definitely made progress like I never imagined was possible. I went from not being able to run even 30 minutes or running 90 minutes to being able to sustain a decent intensity for 10 plus hours in a single event. During these past 4 years of training, my fitness was growing, as was my joints conditioning for running. I then started to get really burnt out on road cycling, like really bad. It felt stale, boring, and all the repetitiveness of roads and the general vibe of road cycling absolutely did not appeal to me. I would go on these rides on epic mountain passes in Italy, France, but every time I would get up to the top, I would see like a dirt road that would keep on going. It always felt like continuing on that road was where the fun actually started, and that I was missing out. I was lucky enough for the fact that I discovered gravel cycling, and this led me to exploring the mountains, and it gave me a real taste of what nature and adventure were. From that moment on, I realized that I longed more and more for adventure, for communion with nature, and being in the mountains, first on my gravel bike, and then starting gradually running more consistently in the mountains, was something that really made me feel at peace. It made me feel reinvigorated, at times exhilarated, way more than just training did. Moving through nature with only my 2 feet and a backpack felt very primal and minimalistic. Over the past few years, trail and gravel cycling especially have grown so much from me and have given me so much. The idea of doing a 100-kilometer mountain ultra was something that really scared me and excited me and sounded like an epic challenge. What would it feel like to run 100k? It's a long distance, even to drive in a car. It sounded like a real adventure. And at this point, having built a solid base for years, I felt that I might be ready for it. And I repeat, I felt I might be ready for it. I was realistic in the fact that it could very possibly be the first event in which I might get a DNF due to how hard it is and of its nature compared to the things that I'd done previously. And this excited me. The general training concept for the 100-kilometer ultra was going to be pyramidal, meaning a lot of work, the majority of it, at a low intensity, a little bit at higher intensities, and some race intensity stuff. This is the pyramidal approach. The lower intensity training was going to be a big chunk of the time, so a lot of time spent training in and around zone 2. The higher intensity stuff was going to be less and as specific as possible to the event, so a lot of climbing hard uphill. This training methodology allows to build a lot of endurance, some speed, while overall mitigating injury risk, which is usually caused mainly by intensity in running. As a baseline training schedule, I used the Ultra Plan on the Motive app, to which I added, took away, or even modified sessions based on how I was feeling. Another key part of the build was going to be cross-training. I find great benefits in cross-training, on the bike especially, for building fitness, while for the most part avoiding overuse injuries. A lot of training was going to be done on the bike. Basically, what I did was rarely run 2 days in a row. If I ran one day, I would ride the next or do a strength workout. Another key thing was the intensity during running. Fundamental thing that I had to do, and actually I would say the most important thing in order to be able to even get to the 100k, was to remain injury-free. If you are injured, there is no way you can make it to the start line. So no event is even taking place. You don't even have a chance to try the event. So all the training could have been for nothing. This is why staying injury-free when approaching a goal so heavy on the joints as an ultramarathon is paramount. This both for overuse injuries and for traumatic injuries like rolled ankles, etc. Ramping up sensibly, or at least within what I believe to be achievable by me without causing damage, and cutting sessions short or postponing them if I felt like a niggle injury was popping up is so important. Unfortunately, this aspect is a skill that personally I've learned only with time and a lot of training and a lot of mistakes, in which I've gotten to know my body fairly well, how it responds to stress, and basically how to fix niggles immediately versus let them linger and become injuries. For this reason, all the intensity for running, which was mostly tempo repeats, was done uphill in order to keep joint loading during intensity to a minimum, but still get a lot of cardio benefit. I also kept on doing intensity on the bike, both with very hard interval sessions and with low cadence sessions. I would do these as a complementary thing to running. The really hard intervals were done to enhance my top end speed, and the low cadence strength workouts were done mostly uphill, and they were made to get some fatigue in the legs, something that can, to an extent, mimic running. Preserving my joints during this transition from Ironman to Ultra was fundamental, and I really believe in cross-training as a means to do this effectively. Another big part of the training build was thoroughly analyzing my weaknesses and take action to better them. In particular, these weaknesses were leg and core strength and downhill running. These were the two things I needed to improve upon the most in order to be able to complete these challenges. For trail running, these two things are fundamentally important, I realized very fast. Tied into these two weaknesses was the third biggest one. I had to build as much specific fitness for ultra trail as possible. I quickly realized that it was going to require a lot of work to get from where I was, which was a kind of aerobically fit person, but a super casual trail runner who had only done distances up to half marathons or 30k with some elevation on easy, non-technical terrain, to try and become a more proficient trail runner, capable of handling longer distances, more elevation, and especially technical, rugged terrain, uphill and downhill. I had probably underestimated just how much specificity was required to run and thrive on trails. The only way to do this was to learn as much as possible from friends who were more experienced trail runners than me, and consume as much online content as possible. More on the resources I used later. But especially, of course, to get in the mountains and train as specific to the targeted event as possible. Learning by doing. Single tracks, rocks, scrambling, uphills, downhills, figuring out my vest, and pack setup, using soft flasks, taking care of emergencies. There was so much to learn. I felt like a total noob, and honestly, I kind of liked it. It felt like starting from scratch again, and it was so refreshing. Having to figure out so many things, training, technique, gear, and safety related, was a challenge in and of itself. So now let's talk about the training build. In total, the specific training build for the 100K was 3 months exactly, September, October, and November 2023. To give you some context, before this specific build, I had basically been training from February till September for Ironman, with very little technical trail running, actually none at all, apart from some long, easy runs down on trails, but very easy trails with minimal elevation. Doing this from February till September was never the plan. I thought that after doing sub 10 in June in Hamburg, Ironman would be over for the year, and I would focus on trail and gravel. But having qualified for the Ironman World Championship, I had to seek to keep injury risk to a minimum, so I stuck with road running, non-technical trail running, and gravel cycling until the World Championship, basically. To give you an idea of what shape I was in, the training from February till September was Monday off, Tuesday hard bike, Wednesday hard bike and strength, Thursday was a hard run, tempo, and a hard swim, Friday was an easy bike, Saturday was a long bike plus a short run, and Sunday was a long run and a long swim. This training, even though it wasn't ultra running specific, helped me to build the fitness foundation for the year. I also think most of the bike training translates very well to running, especially for the zone 2 and low intensity, high volume training that cycling allows, while keeping the impact on joints low. It ranged from approximately 30 hours to 26 hours a week of training, with the biggest weekends being a 5-hour bike ride followed by a 30-45 minute run, and Sunday a 1-hour swim and a long run, anywhere between 17 and 27 kilometers. So weekends would get up to 8 or 9 hours of training. Running volume was between 30k per week and 50 kilometers per week. This training was comprised of a 4-week cycle, 3 weeks build and 1 week recovery. So I was entering the ultra prep already with 460 hours of training between bike and run, with running being around 70 hours or 776k for the year. Not much running at all, but a big solid base of endurance. The goal was to maintain the aerobic fitness already built and try and improve trail-specific aspects of running. Here we enter the Ultra Prep Phase 1, an introduction to trail running. I set up as a target event Ultra Trail Lago Maggiore 55k with 3,000 meters of elevation, 3 weeks after the Ironman Nice World Championship. This race was going to be on the 30th of September. After Nice, I knew that I could handle an 11 to 12 hour event. What I needed now was to make this fitness as specific to the event I wanted to take on. The first month, September, was an absolute show, but with some method to the madness. During these first 3 weeks, I was basically just adapting to a trail type effort. Uphill running, getting off road, and running with a vest with gear in. I needed to recover, build, and taper in 3 weeks. So this meant 1 week focus on recovery from Nice. 1 week with 4 run sessions. Monday I did 1 easy 35-minute jog on trails. Tuesday was 1 intense uphill run and easy on the downhill. Thursday was 1 easy uphill and downhill run. And Sunday was 1 trail half marathon race, full gas. I used the Sunday half marathon trail race to get some intensity in and gauge how much I had recovered from Nice. And basically I had recovered fully. The best way to understand if I have recovered from a big event is if I can do hard, intense efforts without blowing up and without needing a ton of time to recover. And the intensity during this trail half marathon was really high. And it felt good. I had a lot of fun and I felt that I could give more. After the race, I started the taper for the 50k and I felt like the 50k distance was within reach, definitely. My goal was to do the 50k as hard as I could. So the week leading into the race, I did minimal training and tried to recover to the best of my ability. I only did 3 run sessions and they were extremely short, like in the 10 to 30 minute range, and some very short bike rides. Before I knew it, it was time for the 50k. The 50k came and went and I learned really a lot. I made a full video with all the gear, logistics and race experience, and I ended up coming in 13th male completely unexpectedly, so it was a very positive experience. More than that, I learned a lot about intensity and managing intensity in an ultra. I'd gone super hard out from the gun, way too hard, and I'd reached a point towards the end where I felt like I was really completely done, fatigue-wise. And that was because I had done too much intensity from the gun. So this experience taught me I needed to find my ultra intensity, as in the intensity I could sustain for a really long period of time. I kind of knew what this intensity felt like on the bike, but not on the run, where uphills and downhills play a major role in leg fatigue, versus cycling, where it is only climbing that influences leg fatigue, since downhill is basically coasting. So different from ultra trail, where downhill running is actually where the most damage to the quads is done. And I had no clue about this. I absolutely needed to understand what my true ultra intensity was and train more the downhills. The 50k also taught me the value of a crucial piece of gear for races with a lot of elevation: running poles. I was oblivious to this piece of gear, and These are, in my opinion, absolutely fundamental. I realized this during the race, actually just at the beginning, because everyone around me who wasn't a total noob had them. And running poles just help so much. Seeing people overtake me both on the uphill and the downhill, most of them using poles, made me buy a pair as soon as I got back home after the race to try and see how much added value they would give, and lo and behold, they help massively on uphills and also on technical downhills. From this point on, I trained and raced with poles. This 50k played a major role in me deciding to attempt a 100k. I absolutely loved the experience. It was one of the coolest things I had ever done in my life. The nature, the people I met, the insanely hard effort. I wanted to do another one, a longer one, as I felt I had clearly not exhausted all my potential. So I needed to choose a race and train for it. Target race selection is a key part of the training process, as once you identify the goal, you can customize the training to be more specific for it. For instance, choosing a flat versus a mountain ultra is massively different, both in the race itself, but especially in the training. The one thing I knew was that I wanted the goal 100k to be a true mountain ultra, challenging both terrain-wise and elevation-wise. But it was the end of the season in Europe. So I looked around for races to sign up for, and I found one that seemed perfect logistics-wise, even though it was outside of Europe. For winter, I was going to head to Thailand, and even though this race was going to be very tough, with a lot of steep climbs and descents, but I just thought, a bit naively probably, let's go, let's get it. I want a tough race. This race was Dointanon, Thailand by UTMB at the beginning of December, the 9th. In all honesty, this might have been the toughest race I could have chose as a noob. Because not so much of the elevation gain, which it was 6,000 meters, which is pretty standard for a mountain 100k, but the elevation profile. There were a couple of flat or almost flat sections, which meant that the climbs and the descents were going to be mega steep, as they would be compressed in a shorter distance. So I organized a project to go to Thailand with an Italian running magazine and Camelback's PR firm for Italy, and just like that, everything became real. I was going to do my first 100k ultra marathon. I was psyched. But as soon as I got psyched, I also made a couple of calculations, how many hours it would take just to complete the event, and I quickly realized that this was definitely going to be the hardest thing I had ever had to train for, and that I would have done in my life. 50k was a distance and effort that could just be a spin-off of Ironman training, but 100k, it was a completely different animal. Now I needed to come up with the real game plan and train. The first thing was not really training related. This race required a UTMB Index for the 50k to sign up for it. I had no clue about this. UTMB Index means that you need to have completed a race previously of the 50k category, and the race needed to be on a list of UTMB Index races. And of course, the 50k I'd done wasn't on this list, of course. So I needed to include a race to get a 50k UTMB Index in the training plan. I would treat this event as a long run and not as a race. Having figured out these things, I started training. I recovered 1 week from the 50k, opting to do a 200km gravel bike race the weekend after, and resumed running training the week after that. Honestly, the gravel race was a great way to do another full day effort because it was around 11 hours at a high intensity, and it gave me a way to still do high volume training while letting the joints recover from the 50k. The week after that, the final preparation for the ultra began. This was a new phase of preparation, I would say phase 2. From here, I identified the absolute key sessions during the week that were going to be 1 intensity session and 1 long run per week. These were going to be the bare bones of training, the absolute non-negotiables. Around these runs, I would do other zone 2 runs or bike rides and strength work, trying to stay as fit as possible. Another key thing I was going to be doing was strengthening the ankles. I realized that I was very weak in the ankles, so what I did to work on this was to have 2 resistance bands around the house, very light resistance bands, and multiple times throughout the day, when I would pass by these bands, I would perform some external, internal, and toes to shin exercises. Every day, multiple times a day, 10 to 20 reps per exercise. This made a huge difference in my ankle stability. I was noticeably more sure-footed and could correct bad foot positioning a lot better than before. So at this point, I headed into a week where the long run was going to be the event to get the UTMB Index. It was going to be Long Piglione Trail, 37k with 2,000 meters of elevation. This was going to be a solid training day, I thought. I ended up for this reason keeping the week quite light, with 2 strength workouts and 1 easy 20-minute run, 1 tempo run of 55 minutes, with 3 times 4 minutes and 30 seconds at tempo pace with 2 minutes recovery, and then 2 days rest before the event with just a micro 10-minute jog the day before. Sunday was race day. I traveled down to Tuscany for this race, sleeping there the night before. The race started off super hard because it was even shorter than a 50k. I wasn't expecting this, even though I should have, and I of course got caught up in the mix of it, and I went too hard for the first 90 minutes. Around kilometer 13 is when I realized that I was blowing up. I also slightly rolled my ankle at kilometer 8, so I decided to play it extra safe, as all I needed to do was finish this race to get a valid UTMB index. Around kilometer 13, I actually felt incredibly drained of energy and fatigue. And from then on up to 30k, it was pretty much a slog. This was a very, very different experience from the 50k, as in basically I'd already done one race. It wasn't super novel. I made mistakes at the beginning, so it felt really bad, to be honest. I wasn't having a good time. I wasn't having fun. The race course was really beautiful, and that helped a bit. I switched off the intensity and I used this as an occasion to practice gear, nutrition, and running with the poles, which I bought, and it made a big difference. In every moment there's something to learn, and I was very surprised when, with 7 kilometers left, I got an epic second wind and I started to overtake people. I ended up regaining something like 10 places in the last stretch. Not that it matters, but it really helped as motivation to push, and overtaking people was a good way to get a bit more training effect in with a hard effort. And I managed to end the race harder than I thought I could. This long session taught me I still needed to truly understand my ultra pace. I had gone out too hard from the gun, and this had resulted in feeling super beat up. I realized a race setting pushed me too much. So this was very good to up my threshold, to get some very good intensity in, but I felt like I needed to do the next long sessions at an easier pace alone. And you will say, duh, of course, but I needed this UTMB index to register for Doing On, so I had no choice but to use this race as a training session. The running poles helped a ton, both for uphills and downhills. And I also realized that I really wanted to use poles in the 100k. I needed to get a running pack that had a quiver system, as the way that I was carrying them on the front of the pack wasn't great. Wasn't bad either, but a quiver is just so much better. I also realized that I had made a lot of progress on downhills, just by virtue of exposing myself to them and gradually running more and more downhill, combined with strengthening my ankle. The fact that I had taken an ankle roll on my right ankle, the strong one, but it had been corrected immediately and I had felt zero pain during the race, and also the days after, meant that my ankles were way stronger than before. So I kept on with the strengthening exercises. I took 5 full days off after the race. I was pretty wrecked. Not great, to be honest. I had gone too hard, and this was forcing me to have to recover versus being able to train, even just on the bike. I also felt I was overdoing it, and I was starting to feel generally very tired. I resumed the week later with a high volume and high intensity week of cross training. Monday was strength. Tuesday was a 2-hour, 10-minute bike ride with 40 minutes of hard uphill, plus 20 minutes in the evening of uphill farmer carries, 20% of body weight per hand. Wednesday was a hard 145-minute mountain run with 5 by 5 minutes hard with 5 minutes recovery, then recovering running downhill. This is just an example of an intense key session basically. 5 by 5 minutes max intensity with a couple of minutes of recovery between the intervals. Thursday was strength, mostly core and some upper body stuff, and ankle stability. Friday was a 30-minute strength, balance board, ankle strengthening, squats with low weight and high rep, 1-hour easy bike, 30-minute easy run, and Saturday was a 5-hour and 30-minute, 36-kilometer run with 2,000 meters of elevation at what was true ultra pace. This session was so cool. I headed out in the mountains and just focused on keeping it easy, keeping my heart rate low and the effort low. 36k is 1/3 of a 100-kilometer ultra. So I needed it to be so easy that when I would finish this run, I wanted to still feel fresh. This session was an absolute key one and eye-opening. It never felt hard, even though there was quite a bit of climbing. Finally, I had found my true ultra pace. I knew that in the 100k, this is what it should feel like. The total time I trained for in this week was 13 hours. The event was getting closer, and the week after this one was supposed to be the biggest week. I was supposed to train Monday and Tuesday, travel to Thailand on Wednesday, recover a couple of days, and then do the longest run session of the whole build that weekend, taking advantage of what had to be a low mileage week due to travel. But lo and behold, the universe had other plans, and I got COVID. I thought it was a normal cold, but after some days I just took a test and it was COVID because I was feeling really bad. So there was no way I would be able to do that long session in that week, and I had to rethink everything. I was actually pretty scared at this point that this would put a stop to everything. COVID can seriously screw up lungs, heart, etc. And it could take a long time to recover. But I kept on believing that everything would be good, especially since I had seen so many people get COVID in recent times and recover very quickly. Sam laid low. To my amazement, I bounced back super fast, way faster than I thought. And now we enter the final phase, phase 3 of preparation. In these final phases, I made some realizations. I realized that the most important thing to me was just to finish the event. I had no other main goal but crossing that finish line. This meant I understood really quickly that the most important part of the preparation was to get me aerobically fit enough to go for 15 plus hours and be strong enough that my legs and core would be able to carry me for the whole duration of the event. This back to basics ideology influenced my training by making me focus during the final long sessions on covering as much distance as possible at a low intensity. The second thing was focusing on strength training and joint stability. A thing that can quickly take you out of a race is rolling an ankle or getting some kind of traumatic injury. To lower the odds of this happening, I realized that I had to double down and work on lower body muscle strength and endurance and lower body joint stability, especially in the ankles. I'd already been doing this, but in the final preparation, I really stuck to it every day. And yes, the other thing that can result in a DNF is simply not having the muscle endurance power to maintain the effort you need to maintain for 100K while climbing mountains up and down. So for these reasons, I made it a priority to work on joint stability, strength, and lower body strength. So having overcome COVID, it was now the 13th of November and the race was going to be on the 9th of December. I had 1 month. I was running late on the big week, the most key training week of them all. The big week training concept stems from the saying, what you can do in a week, you can do in a day. I really believe in this training principle for Ironman, also in regards to running volume. I always try to have 1 week in which I would do and surpass the 42 kilometers as running distance. So I made a plan to hit a target big week between the 13th and 19th of November, so 4 to 3 weeks out, and it was going to be structured in a way that I would hit 100 kilometers running and I would hit the event elevation, 6,000 meters over the course of the sessions of the week, making sure that the last big session was covering 70% of the total volume. This big week was structured like this. Monday was a short 30-minute recovery ride. Tuesday was 45 minutes run with 3 by 3 minutes at threshold uphill. It could have been more and it should have been more, ideally 5 by 3 minutes threshold, but I didn't want to push too hard after COVID. This session was done on the road uphill. I later in the day did weights. Wednesday was weights plus a 90-minute ride with 50 minutes at tempo intensity, 158 HR. Thursday was a 3 hour and 46-minute tempo/hard trail run. 2 hours and 40 minutes of this run were climbing with a moderate tempo intensity. And then it was 1 hour downhill and flat to get some fatigue in the legs. Friday was strength plus a 50-minute recovery hike, walking super easy and resting for the weekend. Saturday was a 71-kilometer long run at ultra intensity. This was an absolute key training session. And in my opinion, it was super useful. There are a lot of different training approaches for what is the longest run of the build. And I made a whole video about this specific session. The Motive app that I was using as a training guideline built up to this session, prescribing a choice of either a 5-hour run, a 50K race, or a 50-mile race. The app gives you this range of time you can train for, basically. And I reckon that a 5-hour run might be okay as a longest run for a flat or road 100K. But knowing that I needed to complete a mountain 100K, personally, I decided to go for longer, so around 65 to 70 kilometers, and include as much elevation as I could in this session, training as specific to the race as possible. Training specifically for an event had always helped me, like for instance, the Ironman World Champs, where I trained a ton climbing with the bike and running off of it with tired legs. And when the training that I'd done was less specific, it had always been a hindrance, like for instance, in the 50K, I hadn't trained enough running downhill. In this session, I made it as similar to the race as possible. For this specificity reason, on this long run, I made sure I tested out all of the final gear I was going to have to take with me on race day, as well as nutrition. The pack was heavy, and this helped me understand what I was going to have to deal with on race day. Also, I ran a big chunk of it on the actual race course. I ended up doing something like 60% of the whole course itself. This, I felt, was going to be a great advantage on race. Nutrition-wise, I understood that I needed to eat more, and I had way more realizations, for which I will leave a link here to the video of the whole session itself, as I think it could be very useful in your own preparation for the 100K. After this huge 71-kilometer run, to close off the week, I did a 2-hour recovery ride at a low intensity. The total training hours for this big week was 23 hours total, with 110 kilometers of running, 5,400 meters of elevation gain on the run. This week was very hard, as it should have been, of course, but not too hard. I had survived it, and actually, after the long run, I gave a couple of days off for the legs to recover, but in actuality, I could have run the day after the long run, no problem. This session gave me a really big boost in confidence that if I learned from my mistakes and I stuck to my prescribed intensity, I was fit enough to have a chance of getting this 100K done. After the session, it was time to really start resting a bit. The week after this big week, so the 20th to 26th of November, I did mostly cycling and only a couple of really easy 1-hour runs and one mobility and strength session. The second to last week, so 27th of November to 3rd of December, was the last bits of intensity, with Monday being a 2.5 trail run with 2 by 15 minutes high tempo, so a pretty hard tempo pace, done. Tuesday was rest, Wednesday was 2 hours and 35 minutes on the bike and 30 minutes easy run. 9 days out from the event was the final big workout, with a 3-hour trail run doing the recon of the first climb of the race course and the last descent of the 100k race course, all done at a fairly easy intensity. This run really highlighted the progress I had made on downhills also. Running downhill was my absolute Achilles heel, and it still is, but in 3 months, September, October, November, just by virtue of gradually exposing myself to first non-technical downhills and then progressively more technical stuff, and trying to go faster and move quicker through them, I had achieved a new level of coordination and especially of focus during downhill running. Downhill running is, I find, to be a lot about focusing on where you put your feet and reacting very fast. Second thing was leg strength. Downhill was really beat up the quads, and I felt that I made progress also under that aspect. My legs were much stronger and they could handle downhills much better. Then I did a final 30-minute easy run on Sunday, and then nothing the week of the event, from the 4th to 10th of December. I always felt like I'd overdone the last week of training, race week. Specifically because I always find that between race bib pickup, getting the last things done, I always end up racking up millions of steps on my legs during race week anyway. So this time I just did one 3.5-hour hardish gravel ride with other guys I met in Chiang Mai on Tuesday, and then a short 8-minute run on Thursday. Nothing else. Legs up, and I focused on recovery. Specifically for recovery, I did onsen, so hot springs plus cold tub, contrast therapy, 2 times before the race. As predicted, registration days were hectic with a lot of steps, etc. So in hindsight, I thought taking the last final week really easy was a great choice. So the training was over. Here I would like to share with you some training totals so you can get an idea of the volume. The run was 428 total kilometers, 63 hours. The bike was 62 hours. Strength was 6 hours. So the most key things I learned were overall endurance training can be a good way to minimize injury risk while still being very productive for ultra running training. If anything, what I've shown in this video and preparation is how if you maintain a general fitness level, you only really need 3 months to pivot to a 100k. The more I look back at this video and this preparation, the less it is a specifically ultramarathon prep video and more an ultra endurance video. So I would say train however you can manage to get to a high weekly volume injury-free of 14 to 25 hours. It can be on the bike, it can be running, it can be strength, but the caveat is that this training you are doing ramps up and allows you to do the long runs injury-free. The long runs were my absolute key sessions and main focus. The long runs I did this time were 1 marathon in an Ironman, 1 22-kilometer race high intensity 2-hour run around 3 months out from the race, 1 55-kilometer race intensity long run 8 hours 11 weeks out, 1 37-kilometer 5.5-hour effort 8 weeks out, 1 36-kilometer ultra low intensity go all day pace 5 weeks out, 1 71-kilometer low intensity 12 hours and 20 minutes, 3 weeks out from the event, and then the 100-kilometer race. The training realizations I had were that managing intensity is key. This was by far the most important thing that I learned. To go long, I had to dial in my intensity and respect it. My threshold during training went higher and higher, especially thanks to the intermediate races I did. In the trail half marathon, I pushed harder than I've ever pushed in any training session before. During the 50k, the same thing. And marginally the same thing during the first part of the 37k. My threshold went from 168 to 172, and consequently, all the training became harder and, in my opinion, more productive. I felt fitter and fitter as I progressed, apart from the week of the 37k run where I felt extremely burnt out. So all in all, I would recommend doing maybe 1 or 2 shorter races, sometime away from the main event, to push intensity and go beyond our perceived limits in training. For every day, I ate with a high carb, moderate protein and low fat style nutrition. During the training, I never counted calories and was always focused on eating enough to fuel the workouts. And in general, I would eat like this: fruit for breakfast, fruit for lunch, or rice with peas, tomatoes and corn for lunch, rice with peas, corn and veggies for dinner. I supplemented with essential amino acids, morning, lunch and dinner, 9 grams per time. Essential amino acids are a very simple way to ensure I would get the adequate amounts of external amino acids every day. I found these to help with recovery. I drank AG1 every day during the preparation. For performance nutrition during workouts, I used a mix of gels, caffeine gels, maple syrup, Coro vegan gummy bears, dates, and Decathlon cereal bars. For the long workouts, I would fill one soft flask with maple syrup and another one with water, and carry snacks with me. I carried progressively more and more snacks because a big realization was just how much energy expenditure even the low intensity long sessions caused. I was actually blown away about how much I had to eat and how dire the consequences were if I didn't eat enough. The biggest wake-up call was during the longest run workout when, towards the end of the session, all the problems that I had were not related to leg fatigue or to pain, but simply to the fact that I hadn't eaten enough. And I was basically bonking. I highly recommend you to watch the video I made about the longest workout to see what happened. Another thing regarding nutrition that I quickly realized was that during 3+ hour workouts, I would crave more and more solid foods, which came in the form of cereal bars, or in some cases Oreos, etc. The intensity was lower, so I never had any problems with my GI system handling solid food, compared to like Ironman, where the intensity is higher. During the race, I ate quite a bit of solid foods, and stay tuned for the full race recap coming soon. For recovery, the number one strategy I used was heat plus compression. I've talked about this at length in other videos, and this is a super simple strategy that helps ease tight, stiff muscles, tendons, etc. I just wear a pair of compression socks and apply a heat pack to tight muscles and to tendon insertions. This speeds up the recovery in the area tremendously, and I regard this strategy as one of the key factors that have been keeping me injury-free for the past 2 years. I highly recommend you to try this strategy. I don't understand why it's not more mainstream, because it works and it is almost zero cost. Both heat and compression increase blood flow to the interested area. More blood flow means that the body recovers quicker, more inflammation gets taken away, the muscles are more relaxed, etc. I also use this technique to warm up before morning sessions. In my experience, it works 1,000,000 times better than percussion guns to warm up. A crucial part of recovery is sleep. Sleeping a lot versus sleeping a little was a tangible way to see immediately how much it impacted my recovery. If I had had a bad night of sleep, I could feel it immediately the day after. So yeah, I would say sleep is the holy grail of recovery, and highly recommend you putting it high on top of the priorities list, even before the gadgets. The biggest problems I had in the prep were all tied in with external factors. So COVID, and then the 2 wisdom tooth extractions in 2 separate back-to-back weekends. The wisdom tooth things were horrible because I had a fever, I couldn't train for 1-2 days, and then I couldn't really eat much for the following 2-3 days. And especially this sucked on the second occasion because I had to have a second wisdom tooth extracted on Monday before the race, during the actual race week, which is not great because I couldn't really eat much until even Thursday. But in the end, I made do with what I had and I got through it. So additional resources for training are a YouTube channel, Ultramarathon Trail Running with Simon, a very informative channel with simple, straightforward information. I highly recommend you check it out. And the Sally McRae YouTube channel and podcast. The Sally McRae channel impacted my preparation by making me focus more on strength, because she emphasized a lot strength, and I quickly realized during the first month and a half of training how much I needed to improve on downhills, and this meant getting my legs strong and my core strong, activated, and her YouTube channel was very helpful for this. What I will do differently for the next event, mainly one thing that I'm going to experiment with, and it's going to be back-to-back long runs versus doing one super long run. And I very probably will use this approach next time somewhere during the preparation. As far as I've researched and seen from other people who use this protocol, back-to-back long runs provide a lot of benefit, and they impact joints less than maybe doing a really long run, because you recover between one session and the other one. So you get the same cardio benefits, but with less taxing on the joints, which is great in my book. One thing that I would recommend if you are looking to do a 100K is to pay a lot of attention to choosing your target race, because personally I think I chose a race that was too hard. It was really hard, which is great, and don't get me wrong, but I think if I could go back, I would prefer to do a slightly easier race compared to this one. Both maybe terrain and elevation wise would have been great to have. Maybe, I don't know, the climbs a bit more spread out, and the downhills especially, because the downhills were so steep at Dointanon. So yeah, maybe choosing an easier race as the first one could be a solid choice. I mean, the distance is already a challenge in and of itself. So guys, that's it. I hope this video helped you in some way, shape or form in your preparation for 100K. Maybe even just to have a glimpse into the unknown of 100-kilometer ultramarathon training, the long runs, recovery, and all that kind of stuff. So I hope you like this video. Stay tuned for the race recap that I'm going to be putting out very, very soon after this one. I'm a bit struggling right now, gotta be honest. And I will see you in the next video. Bye guys, and thanks for watching.